Envision this. A magnificent dream is taking shape within you. You feel a powerful urge to manifest something the world has yet to witness. Your belief in this vision is so absolute that you are prepared to put everything on the line. This remains true even when people respond with laughter, and even when the world insists you are crazy. It holds firm even when your closest friends commit acts of betrayal. The majority of people surrender at this point. Most will choose to retreat. Yet Walt Disney was not one of them. He faced the rejection of being told he wasn't creative enough. He experienced the devastation of bankruptcy. He was betrayed, cast aside, ridiculed, and left with absolutely nothing. However, instead of conceding defeat, he brought Mickey Mouse into existence. From that point, he constructed the entire Disney empire. He transformed imaginative dreams into a billion-dollar reality. This is far more than a mere story about cartoons. This is a profound narrative of life, suffering, imagination, and an indomitable spirit. If you find yourself in a struggle, if you feel that others lack faith in you, if your dreams seem overwhelmingly large, then commit to experiencing this story to its conclusion. It possesses the power to reshape your perspective. And there is an added benefit. While you listen, you are not only drawing inspiration. You are also enhancing your English skills in a natural, emotional, and powerful way. This story is communicated in straightforward English, enriched with real-life examples, and every moment is articulated with clarity, making it ideal for all learners. Let us journey back to the very beginning. His name was Walter Elias Disney. His life began on December 5, 1901. The place was Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. Walt entered the world as the fourth child in a large family. His father, Elias Disney, was a man of strict principles, diligent, yet prone to anger. In contrast, his mother, Flora, embodied warmth, gentleness, and was a firm believer in Walt's creative potential. When Walt was merely 4 years old, his family relocated to a quaint farm in Marceline, Missouri. This small town would indelibly alter the course of Walt's life. What was the reason? It was a world brimming with trees, animals, trains, and serene streets. Walt developed a habit of watching the trains pass, dreaming of far-off destinations. He deeply cherished the realm of imagination. From his earliest years, Walt started drawing on any surface he could find, be it paper, napkins, or even walls. The family was not affluent. In truth, they were exceedingly poor. Consequently, Walt lacked fine pencils or notebooks. He instead resourcefully used charcoal sticks from the stove to sketch on old newspaper. It was in this manner that the world's most enchanting empire began, with a young boy creating art on discarded paper. One day, a neighbor, upon seeing Walt's drawing of a horse, offered him 5 cents to create another one for her. That transaction marked Walt's first earnings as an artist. Walt harbored a strong aversion to school. This was because it failed to stimulate his imagination. He found it to be tedious, repetitive, and overly rigid. He would frequently drift into daydreams, sketching amusing characters within his books. His teachers would reprimand him for this. His father dismissed his drawing as a worthless pursuit. Nevertheless, Walt refused to stop. The Disney family lived in poverty. His father found it challenging to maintain steady employment. Walt and his brother Roy were compelled to work from a young age. At the tender age of 10, Walt took on the responsibility of delivering newspapers at 4 a.m. every morning. Through the harsh Missouri winters, he lacked proper warm clothing. The cold would often cause his hands to bleed. There were times he fainted at school from sheer exhaustion, yet he never ceased to draw. It was the one activity that truly made him feel alive. When World War I erupted, Walt felt a strong desire to serve his country, but he was too young for military enlistment. In a bold move, he altered his birth certificate to appear older and successfully joined the Red Cross Ambulance Corps. At 16, he found himself driving ambulances in France, a world away from his home. Even in that environment, surrounded by the wounded soldiers of war, Walt adorned his ambulance with cartoons. He sketched humorous characters on its exterior to bring smiles to the soldiers' faces. This act reveals the core of his character. Even amidst conflict, his deepest desire was to spread joy. Following the war, Walt returned to America with a new declaration: "Now I will become an artist." He secured a position at a commercial art studio in Kansas City, where he created advertisements for newspapers. This role, however, was short-lived. Walt harbored far grander ambitions. He was driven by the desire to create moving cartoons, something the world had never experienced before. He established his first company, Laugh-O-Gram Films, with a friend. Together, they produced short animated fairy tales. The public adored their work. However, Walt made a critical error. His focus was entirely on creativity, neglecting the financial aspects. He would often give away his cartoons for free. He placed his trust in too many people and operated without a solid business strategy. Before long, he was financially ruined, utterly alone, and reduced to sleeping in his office. He was left with a mere $40, without food or any form of support. Yet, instead of succumbing to despair, he packed a small suitcase, secured a loan of $500, and boarded a train to Hollywood. He was convinced that his true story was only just beginning. Every monumental dream originates with a determined individual who refuses to abandon their aspirations. Walt possessed no money and had no backers. What he did have was a pencil, a dream, and the sheer grit to persevere. In 1923, Walt Disney arrived in Hollywood with nothing more than a small suitcase, a drawing pad, and a heart brimming with dreams. He was only 21 years old, with just $40 to his name, and knew absolutely no one. He had already experienced a significant failure in Kansas City. He had lost his studio, his savings, his equipment, and his entire team. The one thing he hadn't lost, however, was his belief. Walt was convinced that the world was ready for something new, something that transcended black and white silent films. He yearned to create animated characters with whom people could form a genuine connection. Characters that evoked real emotions and told compelling stories. Walt found lodging with his Uncle Robert, renting a small room for $5 a week. He was without an office, a studio, or a team. Consequently, he set up a camera in a garage and began to develop a new cartoon character named Alice, a young girl existing within a cartoon world. He dispatched the short film, titled Alice's Wonderland, to a New York-based company called Margaret Winkler Productions. To his astonishment, they were captivated by it and extended a contract offer. However, a challenge presented itself. Walt needed assistance. This was not a venture he could undertake alone. He reached out to his older brother, Roy, who was then recuperating from tuberculosis at a veterans hospital. Roy's faith in Walt was unwavering, as it had always been. Therefore, despite being ill and having no money, Roy's response was simple: "Let's do it together, Walt." This partnership marked the formation of the Disney Brothers Studio, which would eventually evolve into the Walt Disney Company. They established their modest studio in a back office located at 4651 Kingswell Avenue in Los Angeles. The monthly rent was a mere $10. They labored day and night with very little sleep, meticulously hand-drawing each and every frame. The Alice comedies achieved a modest level of success, not enough to generate substantial wealth, but sufficient for their survival. Walt began to feel a resurgence of hope. Yet, destiny had another formidable challenge in store for him. In 1927, Walt felt compelled to create a new character, one that was fun, cheerful, and bursting with energy. This led to the creation of Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. Oswald was characterized by his large ears, long legs, and a charming smile. He rapidly gained immense popularity, and audiences fell in love with him. Walt, however, had made a significant oversight. He did not own the rights to Oswald. These rights were held by the distributor Universal Pictures. In 1928, Walt journeyed to New York to negotiate an increased budget for the Oswald series. He was filled with excitement, believing he was on the verge of expanding his business. But upon entering the executive's office, he was met with words that struck him like a dagger. The executive informed him, "Walt, we have hired away most of your animators. You no longer own Oswald, we do. If you wish to continue working, you will do so as our employee." Walt was in a state of shock. His own team, the very people he had trained and trusted, had been lured away by the company. He had once again lost everything. No characters, no studio, no team, and no money. He departed from that building in silence, his eyes filled with tears. Most people would have surrendered at that moment. But Walt was different. He boarded the train back to California, his heart shattered. His company was on the brink of collapse. His dreams had been stolen from him yet again. He refused to allow that train ride to signify the end of his story. Instead, he transformed it into the beginning of something truly unforgettable. He settled in with a notebook and began to draw. His thoughts were, "They may have taken my rabbit, but I will create a mouse. A happy mouse, a clever mouse, a mouse that, like me, never gives up." It was there, on that train journey, that Walt Disney conceived of Mickey Mouse. He understood that this time he had to safeguard his creation. He and Roy promptly secured the copyrights for Mickey Mouse under Walt's name. Now, no one could take him away. A new problem arose, however. No one was interested in purchasing the cartoon. Mickey was considered too novel, too different, and Walt lacked the funds to promote him. He pressed on regardless. They released a short cartoon titled Plain Crazy, but it failed to attract any notice. This was followed by The Galloping Gaucho, which also received minimal attention. With time and money running out, Walt took a significant gamble. He introduced an element that no cartoon had ever featured before. In 1928, Walt released Steamboat Willie, the first ever cartoon with synchronized sound. It featured more than just sound effects. The characters actually spoke, laughed, whistled, and sang. Audiences were astounded. No one had ever witnessed anything comparable. People formed long queues to see this amusing little mouse on a steamboat. Mickey Mouse catapulted to instant stardom. And just like that, Walt Disney, the man who had twice lost everything, was triumphant once more. Walt proceeded to create additional Mickey Mouse cartoons, which were distributed to theaters and screened before feature films. Each short film generated thousands of dollars in revenue. Walt and Roy were finally turning a profit. They expanded their team, invested in superior equipment, and established a proper studio on Hyperion Avenue in Los Angeles. Yet Walt remained unsatisfied. His ambition extended beyond merely producing cartoons. He aspired to construct a world, a realm where imagination knew no bounds. When everything had been stripped away from him, including his own creation, Walt did not succumb to tears, complaints, or defeat. He returned to his drawing board and engineered something superior. They had stolen his rabbit, so he presented the world with a mouse, and that mouse evolved into a legend. This chapter of Walt's life is not solely about cartoons. It is about resilience in the face of betrayal, about safeguarding your dreams, and about creating something unforgettable from a state of brokenness. After the world became captivated by Mickey Mouse through Steamboat Willie, Walt Disney was at last emerging from a period of darkness. The sting of Oswald's betrayal still lingered, but now Walt possessed something that was unequivocally his. Mickey Mouse was more than a character. He was a symbol of survival, a small mouse with an immense heart. Walt was no longer just sketching cartoons. He was methodically constructing an empire. With the profits from the Mickey Mouse cartoons, Walt and Roy acquired a new office on Hyperion Avenue in Los Angeles. Initially, it was a modest space with just a few rooms, desks, and a small team. However, Walt viewed it as the inception of a kingdom. He recruited more animators and inspired them to achieve greater heights, to accomplish things no one had ever attempted before. He was not fixated on immediate success. He was consumed by the realm of possibility. It was during this period that he began to envision something far more expansive. Walt's creativity did not end with Mickey. He introduced Minnie Mouse as Mickey's girlfriend, and she was quickly embraced by fans worldwide. Subsequently, other characters were developed: Goofy, the perpetually clumsy dog; Pluto, Mickey's faithful companion; and Donald Duck, the comically angry duck with a distinctive voice. Each of these characters achieved iconic status. A little-known fact is that Walt Disney himself provided the voice for Mickey Mouse in the early years. Indeed, that cheerful, high-pitched voice was Walt's own. He was not merely the creator. He was Mickey's popularity soared. Walt and Roy ventured into character licensing. They began with small items like pencils, lunchboxes, notebooks, and watches. This was followed by an expanded range of merchandise, including Mickey Mouse dolls, books, posters, and even clocks and toys. Soon, Mickey Mouse merchandise was generating over $1 million annually, a staggering sum in the 1930s, equivalent to more than $20 million today. However, the money itself was of little interest to Walt. He did not purchase large homes or expensive attire. He reinvested nearly every dollar back into the studio. The reason for this was that Walt had a new, audacious dream, a dream that most people considered impossible. In the early 1930s, Walt began to articulate his vision of producing the first full-length animated feature film. This was an unprecedented idea. At the time, movies were live-action, featuring real actors and sets. Cartoons were merely short, amusing clips, typically 5 to 7 minutes in length. When Walt announced his intention to create a 90-minute animated movie, the Hollywood community openly ridiculed the idea, branding it Disney's folly. Even his brother Roy and his wife, Lillian, expressed their concerns. Their apprehension stemmed from the projected cost, which was estimated to be over $250,000. This was merely a preliminary figure. By comparison, most animated shorts cost less than $20,000 to produce. But Walt was undeterred. He declared, "This will change the world. People will sit and weep over a cartoon." Although no one shared his belief, he forged ahead. Walt selected Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as the story for his film. It was a timeless fairy tale encompassing love, peril, magic, sorrow, and hope. Translating it into an animated feature, however, was a monumental task. Walt challenged his team to surpass all their previous achievements, incorporating new animation techniques, depth, shadows, motion, detailed character expressions, a full orchestral score, and hand-painted backgrounds. The production involved over 2 million individual drawings. The budget rapidly escalated from $250,000 to $1.5 million. Walt was forced to mortgage his home and secure loans from banks. The immense stress nearly overwhelmed him. He lost weight, suffered from insomnia, and began experiencing nervous breakdowns. Those around him were deeply worried. The failure of Snow White would mean the shutdown of the entire studio, and everyone would lose their jobs. Walt stood to lose everything. Yet he refused to slow down, asserting, "This is not a cartoon. This is a story about the human heart." The premiere of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was held at the Carthay Circle Theater in Los Angeles. The audience comprised celebrities, critics, and filmmakers, all intrigued, with some still openly skeptical. As the film began, a hush fell over the theater. People started to cry during the poignant scenes. They laughed, they gasped, they cheered. At the conclusion, the audience gave Walt Disney a standing ovation, with many moved to tears. The cartoon had made grown men cry. It had conveyed a genuine story filled with emotion, pain, love, and joy. The impossible had been achieved. Snow White became a colossal box office success, earning over $8 million during the Great Depression, the equivalent of more than $160 million today. It became the highest-grossing sound film of its era. Walt repaid all his debts. He awarded bonuses to his team. He acquired new land and commenced the construction of a larger studio in Burbank, California. Most significantly, he demonstrated that animation was not merely for children. It was a legitimate art form. In 1939, Walt was honored with a Special Academy Award for Snow White, one full-size Oscar accompanied by 7 miniature ones, representing the dwarfs. But his journey was far from over. He immediately began to plan his next animated features, Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Dumbo. Within weeks, all the initial problems were resolved. Within months, the crowds continued to grow, and in its first year of operation, Disneyland welcomed over 3.5 million visitors. Disneyland was nothing short of a miracle. It featured themed areas such as Main Street, USA, a nostalgic representation of Walt's childhood town, Adventureland, with its jungle cruises and thrilling tales, Fantasyland, the enchanting home of Peter Pan, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty, Tomorrowland, a vision of a future with rockets, science, and space exploration, and Frontierland, a tribute to cowboys, trains, and the Wild West. Every corner of the park was infused with music, intricate details, vibrant colors, captivating scents, memorable characters, and pure magic. It was not merely a park. It was a living dream. As Walt famously said, "Disneyland will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world." Walt Disney had constructed an entire world. While many dismissed him as crazy, he risked his company, his home, his savings, and his health. Amidst the dirt and chaos of construction, he envisioned a castle. Where others saw only orange groves, he planted the seeds of imagination. Disneyland was not built with money. It was built with unwavering belief. This brings us to the final dream and the story of how Walt Disney created a world that will never cease to exist. Disneyland was a dream brought to life, but Walt Disney's vision was not yet complete. In fact, just months after the park's opening, he was already dreaming anew. He had created movies, revolutionized animation, and built the first magical kingdom. Now, his ambition was to create an entire city. A city of the future that was clean, safe, organized, and brimming with technology, parks, public transportation, and opportunity. He named it Epcot, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, and he was determined to build it. Walt's goal had evolved beyond mere entertainment. He wanted to enhance the way people lived. He observed the challenges facing American cities in the 1960s: traffic congestion, pollution, crime, and overcrowding, and resolved, we can do better. He imagined people residing in beautiful homes, with safe and efficient transportation provided by monorails and people movers, all centered around a domed city dedicated to community, innovation, and education. There would be no cars in the residential areas, only pedestrian paths and trains, a place where technology and humanity could flourish together. Walt declared, "Epcot will always be in a state of becoming. It will never be completed, but it will always show the world what is possible." He acquired 27,000 acres of land in Florida, an area twice the size of Manhattan. Very few people were aware of his plans. He purchased the land covertly, using shell companies to maintain a low price. When the news finally broke, the public was astonished. Walt Disney was developing a major project in Florida. But what was it precisely? Walt worked tirelessly day and night. He conducted secret planning meetings, sketched maps, and designed models and city plans. He even recorded videos of himself articulating his vision for Epcot. At the age of 64, Walt's creative energy was more vibrant than ever. However, something was silently and insidiously occurring within his body. Something perilous and final. Walt Disney had been a heavy smoker for the majority of his life. Even during studio meetings, he was often seen with a cigarette in one hand and a pencil in the other. In November 1966, he was hospitalized for what was thought to be a minor neck injury. An X-ray revealed a dark lesion on his left lung. It was lung cancer, and it had already metastasized. Walt chose to keep his diagnosis private, not wanting to cause alarm. He confided in only a very small circle of people. Even some members of his core team were unaware. He began treatment quietly, but his health rapidly declined. Despite his weakening condition, he continued to work. Even from his hospital bed, he was surrounded by sketches, maps, and documents. He had the model of Epcot mounted on the ceiling above him, so that when he looked up, he could see his city. Roy Disney would later recall, even in his final days, Walt wasn't thinking about death. He was thinking about what the world could become. Walt Disney passed away on the morning of December 15, 1966, just 10 days after his 65th birthday. The man who had redefined childhood, cinema, storytelling, and imagination closed his eyes for the last time in a quiet hospital room in Los Angeles. There was no grand ceremony, no eulogies, no cameras, only silence. Newspapers announced his death with a sense of shock. Headlines read, "Walt Disney, father of Mickey Mouse, dies. The world has lost its greatest dreamer." President Lyndon B. Johnson issued a statement, saying, "Walt Disney brought joy to the lives of millions all over the world." People wept, from children in Tokyo to families in New York, from animators in Italy to tourists in Brazil. Millions felt as though they had lost someone dear to them. Yet, Walt Disney did not truly die, because his dream was now alive within all of us. Following Walt's death, his older brother, Roy Disney, came out of retirement to fulfill one last mission: to complete what Walt had started. Roy spearheaded the construction of Walt's vision in Florida. Not just a theme park, but an entire world. On October 1, 1971, the gates of Walt Disney World opened. It was 5 times the size of Disneyland, a comprehensive resort featuring a castle twice as large, along with lakes, hotels, trains, golf courses, and extensive transportation systems. Roy made a crucial decision. He named it Walt Disney World, not simply Disney World, because he wanted the world to forever remember the man who had dreamed it first. Just 2 months later, Roy Disney also passed away. The two brothers, who had built an empire from little more than pencils and paper, were now gone. But they left behind something enduring and unstoppable. Today, the Walt Disney Company is valued at over $180 billion. It owns Pixar, Marvel, Star Wars, National Geographic, Hulu, and more. It operates 12 theme parks across 6 countries and has produced over 750 films and shows, employing more than 200,000 people globally. But beyond the monetary value, the numbers, and the business success, Walt Disney left a far more profound legacy. He left behind a feeling, a conviction that imagination is paramount, that dreams are achievable, that a pencil can create a castle, and that a mouse can change the world. Walt Disney was not born into wealth. He was not without flaws. He was not merely lucky. He was a man who simply refused to stop dreaming. He was fired, rejected, stolen from, bankrupted, depressed, betrayed, and fell ill. Yet through it all, he maintained his belief. When the world laughed, he imagined. When the funds were depleted, he borrowed. When his health failed, he continued to draw. And when he faced his own mortality, he left behind an empire of dreams. If you are absorbing this story right now, here is what you must understand. You do not need to be born lucky. You do not need to have everything figured out. You only need one thing, a dream that is greater than your fear. And if Walt Disney could build all of this with broken pencils, empty pockets, and a heart full of belief, then what is truly holding you back? If you have followed this story from its beginning to its end, I congratulate you. You have just effortlessly absorbed hundreds of powerful English sentences. This is how you improve, by listening to real stories told with emotion, and by learning with your heart, not just your mind. If this story has moved you, if it has resonated with you, if it has instilled in you courage, hope, or imagination, then please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Not for my sake, nor for the channel's, but because someone out there needs to hear this story today, just as you did. Allow them to hear it. Let the dream continue. Because, in the words of Walt Disney himself, it's kind of fun to do the impossible.